Hello, and welcome to Windows in Time, Ashland's Lithia Park Fountain, 500 Years of History, presented by Jackson County Library Services and the Southern Oregon Historical Society. I'm Carrie Tannehill, Adult Services Librarian, and my colleague Megan Thompson is also a librarian and is helping Peter in the Medford Library Large Meeting Room. Jackson County Library Services acknowledges that its libraries are located within the traditional lands of the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians and the Modoc Nation, as well as the Shasta, Tukwama, Lakwa people, whose descendants are now identified as members of the Confederate tribes of Silas and the Confederate tribes of Grand Ronde. We take this moment to recognize the indigenous people whose traditional lands are where residents of Jackson County live today. JCLS is committed to fostering understanding, deep respect, and honor for indigenous people, and we encourage you to learn more about the land you reside on. For more information, go to jcls.org/land. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Jackson County Library Services. So I'm going to give it over to the person introducing Peter, and then we'll get started with our presentation in just a minute. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon. I'm that person, Laura Ahern. I'm a volunteer for Southern Oregon Historical Society on the Windows in Time Planning Committee and also president of McKee Bridge Historical Society. And now I'd like to introduce Peter Finkel. He's going to share Ashland's history, art, and neighborhoods through walking tours, community talks, and he has the Walk Ashland.com website. Peter's been an Ashland resident since 1991, and he writes for Ashland.com, Ashland.news news website. And now he'll tell us about the 1916 Butler-Perozzi fountain in Lithia Park.
Well, thank you all for coming, and whoever is joining us on the Zoom video, thank you for joining us. And whoever might listen to this years from now on the Jackson County and Southern Oregon Historical Society Zoom video, thank you for joining us. Okay. First, I want to thank the Southern Oregon Historical Society and the library system for sponsoring Windows in Time. It's a great program, and I have learned a lot myself attending some of the talks in Ashland Library. So I hope you are intrigued by the title of the talk, the 500-year backstory of our 1916 fountain, as Lori said. This is my favorite photo that I took, where you can kind of see the fountain as it is today, and then here is so there's Windburn Way on the left, sort of in the center of this photo, and the path going off on the right, and then there's Windburn Way 110 years ago on the left, and the path going off on the right. Not quite as much vegetation then. So I'm here today because I enjoy learning about Ashland history, and I enjoy sharing what I learned with people, both through my website, walking tours, and talks to community groups like this. And I get excited trying to share some of the things that I learned. So I hope that'll come through both in person and on the video. This one was a very unusual research project for me, though. I mean, I'm going to tell you the basic story that I had heard, but when I started researching the history of the Butler-Perozzi fountain, first I was surprised, and then I was shocked by what I found. So that's what I want to try to communicate to you today. So you know how an archaeological dig uncovers layers of history? Go down and you keep finding new things. Well, that's what I felt like I was doing when I started uncovering the backstory of this fountain. And so the title says 500 years, but I'm going to take you back 1,239 years. Okay. So buckle up your seatbelts. And we are going to learn together how this fountain is connected with French royalty, Leonardo da Vinci, 2 historic palaces in Florence, Italy, the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and much more. So by the time you walk out of this room or finish listening to the presentation, I hope you're going to have sort of new eyes to see not only this fountain, but maybe to see that there's a lot of stories all around us. Okay, so the brief story that I heard and that some of you may have heard was that 2 Ashland businessmen, Gwyn Butler and Domingo Perozzi, bought this fountain at the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition. So that was a world fair that was held in San Francisco in 1915. That's what the fountain looked like at the 1915 World's Fair. And Butler and Perozzi donated the fountain to the community of Ashland. It was sent up after the fair ended, and was installed at its present location in Lithia Park in time for the dedication of Lithia Park in 1916. So that's the basic story and so I want to start in 1916 and just tell you a little bit why that was a standout year for the town of Ashland. I think the 4th of July in 1916 was probably the biggest blowout event in the whole history of the town, all the way from 1852 to 2025. Look at the headline in the local newspaper. 30,000 people on the 4th, but 50,000 people attending over 3. So it was a 3-day 4th of July. We usually, every year there's a parade. This year it starts at 9:30 on Friday morning. A lot of people come, and then there's events in Lithia Park after the parade. But 1916, there was a parade on July 4th, a parade on July 5th, and a parade on July 6th. 3 days. There were 3 nights of fireworks, July 4, 5, and 6. How about 3 afternoons of rollicking rodeos? So this was the grand prize winner in the July 4th parade, the float of the Ladies Auxiliary Club. And then there were 3 days of rollicking rodeos, and there's the field where those happened at the end of Walker Street across the street from Ashland Middle School is still an open field. This photo shows the local Ashlander cowboy Ray Murphy winning the relay race on July the 4th. 7,000 to 13,000 people each day, during those 3 days of rodeos. Okay, today the Ashland City Band plays at Lithia Park after the parade. In 1916, 4 city bands played July 4th, 5th, and 6th in Lithia Park. And if that wasn't enough for people, people came from all over because the town there were about 5,000 population in Ashland back then. And so for 50,000 people to attend over 3 days, Southern Pacific Railroad was publicizing it all the way from Portland down to San Francisco. So people would hop on the train and came to this big 1916 event. But if they still had energy at the end of the day, there were 3 nights of dancing past midnight at the Natatorium at A and First Street and at the Bungalow, which was in the park area. So during part of the big event on July the 4th at 8 p.m., the Butler-Perozzi fountain was officially unveiled. I'm going to tell you about that um, at the end of my talk, because I want to, all those little teasers I gave you in the beginning, we're going to go through the stories here. Okay. So first I want to introduce you to the Gondi family of Florence, Italy, Gondi, Gondis. They play a crucial role in our story. And so I'm quoting from their family history here. Quote, "Theirs is one of the oldest Florentine families, an ancient noble dynasty whose progenitor Braccio Filippi was invested as a knight by Charlemagne in the year 786. So remember I said 1,239 years. That's your 1,239 years right there, where the Gondi family traces their lineage back to this knight of Charlemagne from the year 786. Charlemagne was known as the Holy Roman Emperor, united Europe in the late 700s and early 800s. And this is a rather idealized portrait of him painted hundreds of years later. So the Gondi family descended from this knight of Charlemagne. They became merchants, bankers, and leaders in Florence for centuries. And in the 1490s, one of the most memorable of their family members, Giuliano Gondi, who was called Giuliano il Magnifico, built one of the great Florentine palaces with an imposing roof terrace that overlooks the city. So here's the facade of the house, the quote unquote house, the Palazzo Gondi. And here's the view from their roof terrace, which is famous because it overlooks the massive Duomo or cathedral of Florence that you see there. Okay. The Gondi family were among the richest families in Florence for many generations. And in addition to, this is sort of a little interesting sidelight that I learned that I thought would be fun to share with you. In addition to trading and banking, which they did for many generations, the Gondi family in Florence was also involved in a business called gold beaters. It's an odd name for a business, isn't it? Gold beaters. But what the gold beaters did was that they transformed bars of solid gold into microns thick gold leaf. You know, that thin, very, very thin gold leaf that was applied to art, to furniture, sometimes even to the like domes of buildings occasionally. But more dramatically and probably more profitably, the unbelievably thin sheets of gold were used to wrap silk threads to make gold clothing, literally gold clothing for the royalty and of the day. Wrapping gold leaf around silver threads. And then, I mean, that's just crazy. That's crazy. But, okay. So you might be wondering, why is this guy telling us about the Gondi family? Going on and on about them and their house. Well, because our humble Lithia Park fountain is based on a fountain in the courtyard of the Palazzo Gondi. So this, one of our local Ashlanders, Bob Rasmussen, visited Florence in 2013. He has family ties back several generations ago to Florence, Italy. And he was able to take that photo in the courtyard of the Palazzo Gondi. And so I'm gonna get to the connection between that fountain and our fountain. But first, let's take a little side trip through the connection between the Gondi family and the kings of France. Okay, this is the Gondi Chapel in the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And two members of the Gondi family are buried there. Alberto was an advisor to 5 kings of France during his lifetime. Now, you might guess that if he managed to advise 5 kings of France, several of them didn't live very long. But and then his brother, Pietro Gondi, was the first Archbishop of Paris. So a branch of the family made their way from Florence to France and made an impact, major impact in France. Okay, next, our fountain is connected through the Gondi family with Leonardo da Vinci. Yes, the Leonardo da Vinci. So I found 5 connections between the Gondi family and Leonardo. According to the family history, Leonardo's father lived in a studio in their palazzo, in their house. And when Leonardo was a child, he lived there with his dad for a while. He painted one of his paintings out of the window of his father's place there, and he dedicated that painting to a member of the Gondi family. And we're going to get back to Leonardo in through another connection later. But so the 1490s, I mentioned the Giuliano il Magnifico in the 1490s. The current Palazzo Gondi was built in 1495. The house, you saw that facade. That was built in 1495. So it's one thing for our Butler-Perozzi fountain to be connected with a residence that goes back to 1495. But it is, I don't know how to even put it. It's hardly believable that the same family owns and lives in that palazzo now, today, in 2025, as in 1495. That's incredible. The Gondi family is still there. Here they are. There's mom and dad, and they have 2 sons, and the wife is nameless in this photo, but the wife of one of the sons. So maybe they'll have another generation to follow. That's Bernardo and Vittoria, mom and dad. And I'm even going to, I'm fortunate that I get to share with you that one of Ashland's former Parks Department directors, Don Robinson, was able to visit the Palazzo Gondi and be shown around by Vittoria Gondi herself. And so I'm going to show you their photos in a bit. So the family, you'd imagine with a house that 530 years old, that it might need updating every once in a while. So between 2005 and 2011, the family did a major renovation of the whole building. They also focused their love and attention on updating their two farms that the family owns. So get this, their Tenuta Bossi farm. It's a farm, a vineyard, and a winery which specializes in Chianti wine, has been owned by the Gondi family since 1592. That's only 433 years. And their other centuries-old farm, called Fattoria di Volmiano, specializes in extra virgin olive oil. So they're city folks and country folks both. Well, when the former Ashland Parks director, Don Robertson, and his wife, Linda, visited Europe in 2013, they stopped in Florence, and Bob Rasmussen, who I showed you his photo of the fountain earlier, he was able to set them up with a visit to the Palazzo Gondi. And they were shown around Florence and taken to the Palazzo Gondi by Enrico Marinelli, the fourth generation of the Marinelli family to own the Friuli Gallery in Florence. Now, you're going to hear a lot about the Friuli Gallery in Florence in just a moment. So Don and Linda arrived at the Palazzo. They were ushered into the courtyard, and there to greet them was Vittoria Gondi. She didn't speak English. They didn't speak Italian, but I think Enrico Marinelli probably translated for them. So Don shared some of his stories with me, and Vittoria, of course, they were especially interested in the fountain, and they talked to her about Ashland having a replica of their fountain, and so she was happy about that, happy to hear that. And then she took them up to the ballroom upstairs, and Don took that photo. So shall we talk about the fountain a bit, since that's the topic of our discussion here? Okay, but it all fits together. It all fits together. Okay. Palazzo Gondi, as I said, the building was completed, the house was completed in 1495. Our next important year is 1652. So by 1652, there'd already been many generations of the family living in the Palazzo Gondi residence. So here's on a busy market day what the palazzo or the area looked like with their house on the left, and then here's that on a quiet morning what it looked like. According to a 2013 book about the Gondi family, this two-level fountain in Palazzo Gondi was added to the courtyard by Giuliano Gondi the Younger, named after Giuliano the Magnificent. And he had the fountain built in the year 1652. And so it has been in the courtyard for 373 years. And unfortunately, whatever record there was of the name of the original sculptor has been lost. So we have no idea who the sculptor was. Okay, now the direct link, I mentioned Antonio Friuli in Florence. The direct link between this fountain and our Butler-Perozzi fountain is Antonio Friuli. He was a famous Florentine sculptor in both marble and alabaster, born in 1835. He founded a studio and gallery named after himself, the Antonio Friuli Gallery. He founded that in 1860. I haven't been able to find a photo of him, but I did. Bob Rasmussen sent me a link to his tomb at the cemetery in Florence. And if you zoom in, after he passed, one of the other sculptors in his studio carved this bust of him. So that's what Mr. Antonio Freely would have looked like. So the Freely Gallery specialized both in reproductions of famous Italian and other European artwork, as well as original artwork. And the gallery became internationally known. They would have employed at their peak dozens, maybe even several hundred sculptors. They were making so many artworks. And upon Antonio's death in 1892, his son Umberto Freely took over running the studio. Now, this one, this is an ad, a 1910 ad for Antonio Freely Gallery. And, you know, notice it says the largest establishment of sculpture in marble. But I want you to especially note the top left. Can you read that? Purveyor to 10 imperial and royal families. Classy outfit. So I call this next section of my talk, Will the Real Antonio Freely Please Stand Up? So all of the 1915 and 1916 newspaper articles and articles about that time that I have read state that Antonio Freely is the sculptor of the Butler-Perozzi fountain, which was purchased at the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition, and these articles state that the fountain that Butler and Perozzi bought and brought back to Ashland was a replica of the Gondi fountain, right? And so, but take a look at this. This is the cover of the catalog, the Antonio Freely catalog at the 1915 Expo. Here's the title page. Notice it says largest exporters of marble in the world. They had something like 1,500 sculptures that they made for that Italian pavilion in the 1915 Expo. So that was a big, and they were all for sale. So there's a lot of other places that have some of his work too. But doesn't it look like Antonio Freely's the guy who does all this stuff? There it is. There's the ad, Antonio Freely. The catalog, Antonio Freely. But he died in 1892. The sculpture for the Expo was made probably in 1914 or 1915. So I think we have to assume it was Antonio Freely, the company, not Antonio Freely, the man, right? But since, as the ad said, they were purveyors to 10 imperial and royal families, I think we're in good company. We can't complain about that. All right. So before I move on, I want to just recap where we have been in this quick tour. We looked at connections between the Butler-Perozzi fountain and first Charlemagne, Holy Roman Emperor. Second, Gondi family members who were advisors to French kings and one who's the Archbishop of Paris. Third, Leonardo da Vinci and his father. Fourth, that more than 500-year-old palazzo in Florence that's been in the same family all these centuries. Fifth, the 373-year-old fountain in the courtyard of the family home. And then sixth, the connection with the Antonio Freely Gallery, which it mentions on there was established in 1860. That business is still going. And it's been run by the Marinelli after Antonio Freely's son passed. I think it was purchased by the Marinelli family, and now they've had 4 generations running that business. Okay, now I am going to give you a little quiz here. Look closely at these next 3 photos and tell me if you can see any differences between them. So this is the 1652 fountain at the Palazzo Gondi. This is the 1915 copy of the Gondi fountain at the Expo. And here is the Butler-Perozzi fountain in Ashland's Lithia Park. Okay, I'll take it back again. Number 1, door number 1. Door number 2. Door number 3. Does anybody see any differences? Were you saying the top also? Uh-huh. So so here's what's interesting. Why were people writing that for the last 100 years, people have been writing and saying that this is a replica of this. It is not a replica of it, right? The 2 bowls are identical, and so basically they made a copy of the base and the 2 bowls, but mysteriously they made a change on the top. And I'm going to offer you my educated guess as to where Antonio Freely Gallery came up with that change. Okay, so we're going to go back to Florence. If you walk 1 block west from Palazzo Gondi, you will reach an even older and more famous palazzo. This one is called Palazzo Vecchio, or Old Palace in Italian. It also has a 500-year-old courtyard and an old fountain. Okay, so this is the palace, this is the courtyard, and the fountain. And what do you know? The Antonio Freely Gallery also made a copy of the Palazzo Vecchio fountain for the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition. So here's a close-up of the statue on the top of the Palazzo Vecchio fountain. It's a 1470 statue by and the the sculptor was Andrea del Verrocchio. And this is another connection with Leonardo da Vinci, because del Verrocchio was one of Leonardo's teachers. He was one of his sculpture teachers. Okay, so the Palazzo Vecchio was built between 1299 and 1314. Courtyard was added in the mid-1300s. This is called a bronze puto statue. Puto in Italian means a chubby cherub or angel. Okay, so that's a puto, a chubby cherub, a chubby angel. He made it for the ruler of Florence in the year 1470, and then it was moved to the top of that fountain inside the courtyard in 1557, and spring water is piped in and flows through the dolphins. It's a dolphin that the cherub is holding. So the spring water flows in through the dolphin's mouth. And okay, so what I noticed was I noticed 4 similarities between this little statue at the top of the Palazzo Vecchio fountain and our statue at the top of the Butler-Perozzi fountain. So this is the original 1915 marble. It is now in the Ashland Library, the marble sculpture, and there's a bronze replica of this currently on the Butler-Perozzi fountain. That's the front view. So doesn't it look like he has wings? And then here's the back view. But that is not a cherub. That is a boy holding a goose. That is a cherub holding a dolphin. Okay, and so here are the 4 similarities. You know, bear with me. You may see these or not see these, but both have a young boy, and here's the side by side. Both have a young boy or a cherub with curly hair holding an animal in his arms. And number 2, the dolphin's mouth tilts up, as does the goose's beak. Number 3, the Del Verrocchio cherub has wings, as you would expect, right, from an angel. The boy on our fountain appears to have wings, and the way the sculptors put the goose's wings, you could almost see that as the part of the boy. Well, here's a quote from our local Ashland Tidings newspaper on July the 6th, 1916, talking about this brand new fountain. It was just dedicated 2 days before, unveiled 2 days before on July the 4th, 1916. So the reporter said, quote, "The fountain is made of beautiful Verona marble. The figure is that of Cupid playing with a swan." These words are inscribed on the fountain, Fiori di Pesci, which is the Italian for flower of peaches, end quote. So no wonder people got confused, because from the very beginning, the reporters were saying, hey, this is Cupid with a swan, right? And then number 4, in both fountains, water spouts up and out through the mouth of the animal, both the dolphin and the goose, and through the mouths of 4 lions that are carved around the bowl of the fountain. So my theory is, for some reason, the Antonio Freely gallery sculptor who did the the copy of the Palazzo Gondi fountain wanted something fancy on the top and took this as an inspiration, because they were very familiar with it. They may have even carved that other one and just sort of changed it from a cherub with a dolphin to a boy with a goose. We will never know, however, because the records of the Antonio Freely gallery, which go back to 1860, were destroyed in a huge flood in Florence in the year 1966. Darn, we're stuck with a mystery. Okay, so let's come back to Ashland from our journey through time and especially to Florence. Talk about those 2 men who brought the sculpture to Ashland. They were Gwyn Butler and Domingo Perozzi. I want to tell you a little bit about each of them. Gwyn Butler, he might have been the first Euro-American who was born in Jackson County. He was born January 19, 1854. He married Alice Barron, who was also born here, one of the early pioneers, born in Jackson County in 1857. Butler was successful in number of different businesses. He was very active in the Ashland community. He was the Ashland mayor in 1906. There he is as the mayor. Here's a photo of the couple at their home in 1915 on 41 Granite Street, and that house is still there. They are not still there anymore, however. In 1915, Butler went to the Panama Pacific International Exposition, and the story goes that he was so impressed, something about that particular fountain impressed him, and he called up, or he telegraphed his buddy and neighbor, Domingo Perozzi, and said, come on down here. I want you to take a look at this and see if you like it as much as I do. So Domingo Perozzi went to San Francisco, probably on the Southern Pacific train. And when he arrived, he liked it. He agreed to help purchase it with Perozzi. They bought it for $3,000, which was the equivalent of about $90,000 in today's money. So it was a significant step. The two men donated the fountain to the community and also donated the land that part of the park where the fountain is built was also land that was some of it was owned by the Butler family and some by the Perozzi family. So they also donated some of their land for the expansion of Lithia Park. Gwynn and Alice, his wife, did not have children, but they were very generous with the Ashland community, both while alive and after their deaths. You've probably heard, if you haven't, some of you, how many of you have heard the Ashland City Band play? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And that is called the Butler, the Gwynn and Alice Butler Memorial Band Shell. It was built in 1949, and that is still where the band plays. This summer, they're going to have 10 concerts. Most of them are on Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. through mid-August, if you are so inclined. And then another ongoing legacy is the Butler Memorial Trust Fund of the Ashland Elks Lodge. And but the Butlers established this fund, and every year the what is it called? Not the principal, but the interest that is made every year goes to help support youth activities in Ashland and Talon. So this for all these years since the late 1940s. Okay. Domingo Perozzi was the owner of Ashland Creamery, which was the only creamery in Ashland County, in Jackson County in the early 1900s. And it was located approximately where the ice rink is now, right across the street from Lithia Park. He had a bustling business. This is an 1897 photo showing farmers bringing their milk to the creamery. I found a 1901 article that said 30 local farms were providing milk for Domingo Perozzi's creamery. So lots of butter, lots of ice cream. In 1908, he did a renovation. So, the original one was wood. This 1908 renovation was considered the hygienic, a fancy hygienic upgrade, because you could sterilize things a lot more easily with the concrete floors and walls. And I like this 1916 ad from the local newspaper. When buying butter, ask for Ashland Creamery butter. So Perozzi was born in Switzerland in 1871, but his family moved to California when he was a child. However, he did learn at least one or possibly two other languages, as you will see in a moment. And his house on 88 Granite Street was built in 1902, the year he married Louise Garnier. Here is a photo from their wedding album. The two newlyweds. And I like this photo. I don't have a date on it, but I marked the two Perozzis and the two Butlers. Those are all neighbors who lived on Granite Street at the time. And just based on the ages of the Perozzis and Butlers, I'm guessing it was probably the 1930s. The Domingo and Louise Perozzi's property extended downhill from Granite Street all the way to what's now Winburn Way. And they had another big impact on Ashland in addition to the dedication of the fountain. According to Louise Perozzi's obituary, one of the reasons why Southern Oregon University is located where it is right now on Siskiyou Boulevard is because the Perozzis donated 40 acres of land to help build the university there, in the 1926 campus there. Okay, we're getting down to the finish line here. A few months after the Panama Pacific Exposition ended, the fountain, all 12,000 pounds of it, was shipped by train to Ashland. According to one account in the March 1916 newspaper, it said a French expert who did not speak English arrived from San Francisco to oversee the erection of the fountain. Well, and then I found another reporter at the Ashland Tidings wrote an article that said, and this one he gave a few more details. So picture this in your mind. Quote, I'm sorry, his article referred to Fernando Rosada, an Italian expert from San Francisco, coming to do the job. And here's how the reporter described what it looked like. Quote, Rosada does not speak English, and a good-sized crowd of bystanders enjoys hearing Mr. Perozzi translate his instructions and watching Gwyn Butler try to get his meaning through the hand gestures. So, well, they finally finished installing the fountain on July 3rd. When was the dedication? July the 4th. They did it just in the nick of time. And the very next day, Perozzi's 12-year-old daughter, Lucille, had the honor of pulling off the cloth to unveil the fountain during the 8 p.m. Evening ceremony. Okay. I tried to, this photo, 1916 photo, was taken from up above the fountain looking down into the park. I tried to get a similar photo, but the trees have grown up so much, I had a hard time doing that. So I'll go back to my personal favorite one of my photos. So from 1916, we went 1,239 years and then came back to the Palazzo Gondi fountain, the 1652 fountain. Then we came back to 1915, 1916. Here we are. You might know that the fountain is getting ready to be renovated. So there was a renovation done in the 1980s. And at that time, the original marble was moved. The marble boy with the goose was moved to the Ashland Library, so that's kind of nice because you can see it up close now if you go to the Ashland Library. I hope everyone goes to the library. Okay. And so now it's a bronze replica, which is going to weather the elements much better than that. The Verona marble was a kind of a soft marble. Fundraising has been completed for a second but this is going to be a much more extensive renovation because the whole base is in bad shape. The plumbing is in bad shape. After 110 years, the electrical is in bad shape. So they're going to rip the whole thing up and probably next year redo all of the electrical, the plumbing, as well as all the concrete, and then repair the fountain. So I want to thank Bob Rasmussen and Don Robertson for sharing some of their stories with me that allowed it to be a little more personal to Ashland. And I just have a quote here. I like how our local reporter, Janet Eastman, who writes articles for the Oregonian in Portland, this is how she described the Butler-Perozzi fountain's role in our lives. Quote, "For generations, it has been a place to pause and ponder and to document life-changing occasions, high school graduations, marriage proposals, reunions, and the like." So I hope that you're seeing this humble fountain in new eyes and with a deeper appreciation for its place in our community. And if you enjoy history, which I'm guessing you do, you can learn a lot more Ashland history. I also write about art on my website and neighborhoods all over Ashland.